Hey guys, how's it going? I'm the Duke of Italy, your favorite lo-fi music YouTuber, and today we are covering part two and the final part of this short little shoegaze excerpt. A little tangent while I'm trying to listen to more music and get my things in order. But honestly, stuff I've been working on for a really long time. Once again, this thumbnail has been made by Jennifer. Jennifer's cool. Follow in the description and support local artists or just small artists. Jen's pretty tiny. Just every time Jen has told me I'm small, I have did a full like a full military press and then launch like a gorilla with a person. I've got like a gorilla frame in comparison to Jen. But with that comes an inability to draw. So if you need someone to draw, hire Jen. And if you need someone to recommend you Shoegaze, Jen's not a bad option either. But I think I'm a little better because we're covering some more stuff along the lines of Slowdive Souvlaki. And similarly, I'm covering some different stuff today. And in fact, we're starting today off with more Slowdive. And today we're talking about Slowdive's Pygmalion, which the direction for this part of the chart says goes back from Radio Department, the one I closed the last video with, and it says more abstract, and it's not wrong. It's definitely more abstract, but this one is a really, really cool album and a unique one at that for how sheerly ambient it is. You're gonna have long songs that lean into ambient and not like a thick wall of ambient like some stuff we'll be covering on the next sort of shoegaze portion we'll be talking about in upcoming videos, but this is actually more like somber, sparse ambient. It's really cool stuff. Now Slowdive for me has sort of a recognizable old-fashioned sort of raw production style, or just kind of lo-fi. Updated and seriously polished is the sound of Pygmalion. It sounds simply amazing. It's polished, it's up to date, and it fits the aesthetic super well. It kind of reminds me just a little bit of like the modern low records in a way, where it would have all this space in between, but less like distortion than those would normally have. It sounds really ghostly and trippy. I'd say you have a serious sort of slowcore bend to this thing because it leans so far into the background. And also the song Jay's Heaven sounds like Have a Nice Life, so I have to recommend it just for that. But this album is seriously unique, a great one to start the video, and just a great album in general because it sounds so cool. It really does like a thing that like a lot of your favorite bands might do at some point in their career. It just does it for the whole album, and it's in a way that's very airtight. It doesn't feel like fodder. It feels like a very engaging and well-performed listen. I recommend this one all day. And apparently if you add some jangle pop influence, you get all natural lemon and lime flavors self-titled album, which I'm not exactly the best friend of jangle pop. I've got my problems with the Smiths and similar bands, but here it works really well. It's really fun. But more importantly than the fact that it's fun, it's never ever boring. It's just simply front to back a good, engaging, sort of energetic listen. If you are absolutely desperate for your shoegaze to have a serious amount of quirkiness, this is not your album. This one kind of falls in line and doesn't try to do anything too weird, but what it does do is it's just executed very well. The production style is super lush, so if you're missing that style, more of the My Bloody Valentine style thing, which I certainly do. That's something I like more than any other style of shoegaze. This is definitely an album for you to listen to. Honestly, it's one of the best sounding shoegaze albums I've ever heard. If this thing isn't just jangle pop, it's simply is the best massage for your ears ever. This thing's great for nothing more than the fact that it is a sonic sense of bliss that you're gonna get from this thing. There might be some more intelligently written shoegaze out there. After a re-listen, I should probably dive into this thing more and probably do a full review on it at some point, like a good track-by-track breakdown. I think it could be fun. But I think it's worth your time just as is. And if you get a strong indie vibe, this sort of goes into DIIV with Ocean, spelled O-S-H-E-N. Yeah, you get some real simple teeny bopper stuff. You get some indie surf and some post-punk. This is a very accessible album. And I won't lie, it is totally chained down by the fact that it is indie. But the super, super lush production is what carries it over anything else. It makes it far dreamier than it has any right to be, which makes me a little bit conflicted on this release. It's like, how good is the songwriting really, and is it just not a sonic exploration? But then again, that kind of recontextualizes the entirety of shoegaze, so I'm not going to think about it too hard. But this album certainly understands its strengths. It has a lot of really long-winded instrumentals that take their time and build up a lot of energy, but also cause you to relax and just find yourself floating in this ocean of sound. The song Air Conditioning is one of my favorites, how it just totally revels in just how good it sounds. It knows what it's doing. It is super repetitive, and in a way it works really well, and I'm not sure if it's intentional. It feels almost unintentional. Not that there's that much of a problem in that in terms of a listening sense. So as divisive as it is, and how I feel bitter about its construction, and even the people behind it feel like they just have an attitude that I wouldn't like about music, the experience of listening to this album is a good one. And if you want something similar, you get Blender Tongue Audio Baton by the band Swirlies, a band I've checked out in the past, but not this album. A band that is pretty decently consistent, early output, good stuff, not too far off from noisier shoegaze counterparts, but this one is a little bit more on the indie side, but still has actually a lot of character that the better side of indie brings into its music. Imagine Swerve Driver, if you will, if it was less based and more incel core feeling, or like loser core music, or like some Weezer. I love Weezer, but it's true. And it's slowly leaving the shoegaze territory into this other zone, which is very interesting because shoegaze has a distinct atmosphere for itself. Unless it goes into like Have a Nice Life territory, it has a very cool sort of like semi-ethereal attitude to the whole thing. It really makes you feel good about yourself, in all honesty. This album is just not that case. It sort of makes you look at yourself in a bit more of a reflective way. But it is fun. It is truly at its core a rock and roll album, and a fun one at that. And probably the best example of a track on here would be Pancake, because it's so inherently shoegaze, this one, probably more than any other one, but it's got a jangly sort of indie vibe to the whole thing. It goes to be more fun than anything else, and for that, I can't complain at all. It also is very twee, so you get a huge contrast between the heavy, thick layers of distortion and the more twee moments, which I think is a very beautiful and reflective contrast that, dare I say, even says something about the human condition. So I think this one's actually kind of great. I think you all should listen to it. And I don't find it to be very similar to their other material, but somehow if you want something more indie inspired, you get Deer Hunter with Microcastle. Yeah, it sounds kind of like a slightly thicker version of The Strokes. It's got this specific sort of grating vocal reverb that I don't like. But that being said, the rest of the album has a lot going for it. You get a lot of really warm tones and tremolo effects. The title track is something really special. It has no drums at all, so it relies strictly on its really thick, sort of ambient leanings. Really a marvel on this album compared to some of the other tracks that are arguably a little bit less interesting. Overall, it is solid. The lead guitar is a serious highlight on this whole thing, as well as the final track, which has a good cathartic lead out to the album. Overall, it is very album. It feels like a well-rounded, well-structured, consistent album at that, which oddly doesn't feel very indie at all. But the stylistic leanings do feel a bit more indie, kind of like the band being a little against their label at points, if you will. But that all being said, I think it's good. I think there's not a lot that's particularly offensive about this whole thing, but at the same time, not a ton that's all that innovative either. But at the same time, it is a shoegaze album, an indie shoegaze album, one that your ears will enjoy. And if you want something poppier, you go into the band No Joy with Wait to Pleasure. It is certainly poppier, but I'm feeling a lot more rock and roll on the opener E, which is just a burner of a track. Unfortunately, the rest of the album does kind of start to wear thin shortly after that. Lunar Phobia is another highlight with its electronic influences here and there, but the rest of the album lacks in substance and a lot of innovation. It's one that falls too much into the shoegaze genre. In particular, this is an album without any staying power. The fact that it isn't saying anything and then it just keeps on doing that kind of ends on more of a whimper than anything else. But again, at the end of the day, it sounds pretty pleasant, and that opener is just so exciting. It's really just downhill from there, but at the same time, the whole thing ends up being okay. Just there are highlights, and they differ a lot from the other tracks. And if you want something that's more twee, we go into The Pains of Being Pure at Heart's self-titled album. And on this particular album, he sounds a lot like Morrissey, this vocalist, which I don't like Morrissey. So unfortunately for this, I think it turns out better than what Morrissey can typically do. Most of the tracks here do have a decent sense of dynamics to them, which is something that shoegaze can occasionally lack in. It might be poppy and jangly, but it's also really soft and cozy, which lends back to those dynamics I was talking about earlier. It makes the loud parts feel absolutely monolithic in a way that lends entirely to the ultimate effect of the album. It is a super pleasant and even beautiful feeling overall. It is a super, super gratifying album that feels like a hug. It's one of the coziest things you'll ever hear, and it is something you should hear. So give it a listen. It's great. It's very warm. Very, very warm. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. And if you want something that is just like this, we go into the final Slowdive album that we'll be discussing on this chart, Just for a Day. The comparisons to Souvlaki are obvious and unavoidable, so I'll just get them out of the way right now. A lot less dynamics, but at the same time, a whole lot gloomier. That all being said, ultimately, the instrumental aesthetic is very, very similar. It makes, honestly, Pygmalion stick out that much more in their discography, and it makes their latest album from 2024 that much more disappointing. Seriously, that album was kind of a bust, if we're all being honest with ourselves. But what wasn't is this one. It's cool. Dare I say it feels a bit slowcore influenced, and that's something I love in my shoegaze. I can't get enough of it. I swear, I'm going to cover slowcore at some point for you guys. It's something I've been looking forward to for a couple of years at this point. The track Primal is a real highlight. It is just so loud and crushing, and honestly, the whole tail end of the album around Primal is very effective as well. It's so much louder and so much more heavy than the front end of the album. It has a real sense of dynamics as well. If I had to pick a side of the album to keep, it would be that one, but fortunately for the beginning of the album, I like that one a lot too. But another thing I like about this album is that how uncompromising it feels. It doesn't dip into pop as much as Souvlaki. It is heavy and gothic feeling, which, despite the similar instrumental aesthetic, it's the approach that they're going with here that makes it really, really interesting. I think this one is great as well, and a welcome addition to the shoegaze canon, and one that I didn't really expect all that much. It's not an album I've heard anything about before I actually heard it, so what can I say other than the fact that I have zero regrets? And for the last two albums on this portion of the chart, we get something really fun. You get the question asked to you, I guess, didn't these guys form some kind of country band? To which it points to Mojave 3 with an album called Excuses for Traveling. It is absolutely an alt country album. Calling it shoegaze at all, I would say, is pretty generous. But that being said, the production style of this thing is super lush and gratifying. It doesn't quite feel like shoegaze like a lot of these albums here, but it's, as far as country could go, it's pretty close. And a lot of this lush quality comes from the wide variety of instruments. You know, you don't have a wall of guitars here. Now you're getting banjo and a super domineering organ sound, which is one of my favorite instruments to hear at any point. It's super interesting, adds a lot of dynamics, serious weight on the bottom end of the mix, and I'm not even saying like bass. It just feels like it's spaciously around the other instruments. And there's also a serious singer-songwriter bend to this thing, which is not on any other Slowdive material. This feels far more personal. It is very interesting hearing a country album with this much space, and at the same time not feeling very hollow at all. It feels relatively thick, and at the same time it feels indescribably wide. And I'm sure that is due to just the panning of the instruments, but it's certainly remarkable. It's caring, it's soft, it's a little bit warm, and the songwriting is decently solid. The only thing is it lacks a little bit of that extra hit of dynamics I really like. Not really a wall of sound point, and maybe that's just me being biased. You know, maybe that's not something they're trying to do here. I do find a couple of songs just a little bit too samey, but at the same time, it's got a cool vibe to the whole thing. I think it's good. But then we get into something I find to be a little bit more interesting as the chart goes into, it says, traditional American-influenced shoegaze is a neat idea. And this is with the band Starflyer 59 with their album Americana. Now, here's what I don't understand about this chart. Its direction here doesn't make a lot of sense. This album does feel distinctly American. You could only make this if you're an American living, I don't know, somewhere in Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, that sort of southwest belt we have. This thing feels desert-like. It feels wild. It feels rockin'. But the thing is, it doesn't feel like Americana at all. Maybe Americana in themes, but it feels like a distinct rock sound. It has a whole lot of slowcore parts that add a lot of really interesting dynamics, but it's got a really cool attitude I could compare to Swerve Driver or maybe Ringo Death Star. It's a serious, serious confidence booster just listening to this thing, which I don't know how shoegaze really does that. There are a few albums in shoegaze that just have a particular 1950s, 1960s Americana aesthetic to the whole thing. Not playing style, although Spiritualized does sort of have that playing style. And it just lifts it into the super interesting realm of confidence that directly appeals to us within our capitalist realist society. Conceptually, this thing's banging. The riffs just refuse to be floaty. They are super sick. They actually rock. The organ is back on this one, which feels almost Ascension-like. It's seriously based. And the lead guitar is a consistent highlight, especially on possibly my favorite track on this chart, You Don't Miss Me, which is an utter banger and a hell of an album to close on. This one is great. Very unique album, super awesome one. Starflyer 59 is a band I need to listen to just a little bit more. You'll find another one of their albums on a later point. But this is the end of this quarter of the chart. I'm going to flip the page in my notebook because I'm tired of seeing that garbage. But we're done with that. Yes, we are. And I'm pretty happy with that. I hope you guys are too. If you are, I'd appreciate a like, subscribe, comments, questions, and concerns down there. Do you guys like shoegaze? Is this your first time watching me? Is this your first time hearing the words shoegaze? Are you wondering what the genre even is? Because I know it's actually pronounced Shoegaze. But outdated memes aside, social media is in the description. My Instagram, my X, and my page is a Discord for the YouTube channel if you want to talk about music with the rest of us. And of course, the artist of the day, and pretty much the whole summer, so get used to it. Jen's Twitter, actually Instagram rather. I'm not shouting on Twitter. Jen's Instagram's in the bio below. Follow that as well if you could. But I'll see you guys in the next series, which will be some more shoegaze, actually. I'm just trying to tie up some loose ends. But that is about it. Hope you guys have a good day. Bye.